Show tunes with lyrics where skill never wobbles, no wrong emphasis on errant syllables, lively discussions of songs, queens and kings. This is the podcast my favourite sings. Rather than dissing what Broadway's rewarding, I'll give a listen to Goldsmith and Gordon. They'll dissect musicals, arrows and slings. Here on the podcast my favourite sings. When the show bites, when the rhymes suck, when the crafts regressed, I go to the podcast my favourite sings, where David and Paul know best. There he is.
And there we are again.
Welcome to My Favorite Sings, Paul.
Yes, that's not what we're calling this, but that's fine.
Oh, no. It's done. It's done. I've AI'd the logo. It's My Favorite Sings.
Yeah, just know that I have a major protest vote.
Yeah.
And that I don't like the title at all. And that I think not only does it refer to the golden age of musicals, which is sort of not what we're doing, but it's also not a great pun. But I still think you're very talented. And I think you've done other things well, other than come up with the title of this podcast.
All duly noted. So welcome to My Favorite Sings.
Yes.
How are you today, Paul?
Happy to be here.
Good.
I'm feeling pretty good. Ready to go, march for freedom later.
Oh, that's right. Today we're marching for freedom. You're marching for freedom. That's wonderful.
I'm marching for freedom in Midtown Manhattan.
And I'm cheering you on from Jersey City.
Thanks, buddy.
So before we get into the business of the day, have you written any new musicals this week?
Yes, I started a new musical that I actually invited you in on, and I've abandoned.
Oh yeah.
I've abandoned the musical, as you know.
It's interesting, isn't it? We should tell our listeners.
Can we pause for one moment while I turn off my heater that I don't need?
Yeah. I'll fill in our listeners while you
Hey, question before you fill them in. Do we have any listeners? That's my first question.
Oh my God. They're legion.
All right, great. Just checking.
Oh, of course.
Checking to see if anyone.
And I've got everything. I've got what we talked about last week. I've got it ready to go, which is basically us. It's like our work, which we're going to do a little bit of us this week.
Wow.
Week four. I
Okay.
think we've eased into the bathwater of the greats of our era and previous ones. Now we can talk about but before we do, this is an interesting thing that happened because we were looking at a piece that had come into the public domain, which some of our listeners over the age of 60 will remember as His Girl Friday, which was a Cary Grant, Rosalind Russell film from, I guess, the 40s, right?
Yeah, 1940, actually.
Is it Howard
That
Hawks?
was later. Yeah, and it was later the front page with I know it was Jack Lemmon, was it Walter Matthau? I can't remember who the co-star was. But that was they took, I guess, and this will be relevant to what we're talking about. I think they took that story but wrote it for two men. And obviously the story is different, and I don't know that story, and maybe it's better.
But the problem we came up against really was we had a lead male character who was just a part of an era that we really have happily left behind, where, I mean, for want of a better phrase, toxic masculinity really was a stumbling block.
Yeah, and I think that, we asked ourselves the right question was, do we need this?
Yeah.
And the answer that we came up with is, no, we don't need this. And, at first, when I will tell our listeners or listener
Yeah.
that we were looking for something in the public domain because we're looking for a brand. Because, as we talk about musical theater and Broadway, one of the things that is so frustrating is that, nowadays and for a while, you either need a celebrity to be in your musical to get to Broadway, or it needs to be a brand, which is generally a movie that's been out in the public in the last 20 years that is likely inappropriate to be a musical, but a producer who saw the movie in the 90s is just going, wow, I've got to make this a musical and hire my favorite band that's never written a musical before. And so we have been looking for something that is a brand. And since, we're not millionaires and gazillionaires, we can't necessarily obtain the rights to a movie that we think could be appropriate for a musical, and have a brand. So we've been looking at public domain works, and it was just disappointing
Yeah.
because, as you say, the character was very toxic. And whereas in the 40s, of course, Cary Grant brought such a charm to the character that even at the time, because the character is just sort of despicable,
Yeah.
but he's so charming because he's Cary Grant that the audience didn't notice. But when you're writing a musical, you can't be dependent on the charm of an actor to make the story work. And
Yeah.
that's what we learned.
And now, unfortunately, we're just a little bit early now in terms of not being millionaires. I'm just waiting for these tariffs to kick in, and then we're going to really be able to
Oh,
bankroll
yeah.
on.
So, yeah.
But before that happens, we have to go back to our three questions of, when you're deciding what musical to do or to do a musical, what are the things that you ask? And one of them is, does it sing? This one did. You wrote some really good music for it.
Yes, absolutely.
Um, the one that really, really came up against, which you alluded to when you said, "Do we need this?" is why this musical, why now? Which is, I always say, that's my third one. What's the second one? I forget because I'm getting old.
Well, I don't remember the three, but obviously the other one is that if you're writing the story, you're going to live with the story for probably 10 years.
Yeah. Do I
And do
want to
you
live
want
with
to live
the
with the
characters?
story? Do you want to and is there a reason that you feel like the story needs to be told? I'm just going to jump to Glengarry Glen Ross on Broadway right now. And I'm just going to say, did you need this?
I love the
I mean,
lyrics
I'm
to Glengarry Glen Ross. Those are some really great, great songs.
some great lyrics. But no, but I'm just saying, because I really think one of the most important things that people miss about musicals is just that you have to start with the story. And I think it is literally the most important thing. And I think it's the
It is.
thing that most people get wrong. There's an exciting
Oh, that
idea.
was thing number
There's,
two. Do I care?
yeah, do I care?
Does it sing? Do
And
I care? Why this? Why now? Those are
right.
three.
And again, for you, the individual, those three questions can all be affirmative, but but those questions may not be right for an audience. You
Sure.
know, David Mamet, cared about those characters in Glengarry Glen Ross. And at the time, it was a very interesting play when it came out. Now in 2025, I have to ask the question, do we really need to see more male toxicity on stage to know that this is an issue? And so I feel like, in the pieces as you and I and as others try to grapple with what are the stories that we feel are important to tell right now? Because obviously you and I were going for public domain brand. We didn't start as this is a story we needed to tell. We actually did the opposite. We actually went, this is a brand. And then as we looked at it, is this something we want to tell? And the answer was no.
Right.
And that's the frustrating part because the stories that I want to tell really are coming from us,
Yeah.
coming from originality. They're original stories. As, Five Women in an Airport, your wonderful musical with John Cavanagh is an original story. It's not a brand. It's not something that necessarily a Broadway producer is going to go, oh my God, this title, here's $15 million. And yet it is such high quality. It is a story that we need right now. And I think what some of us that do this for a living are finding frustrating is that no, we'd rather take a television show that failed and make a musical of that and throw all our money into that. Or, take, as we've said, take a movie from the 90s. And I also want to say that there is nothing wrong with taking a movie from the 90s or the 80s or any movie. Movies are an absolutely valid source material as much as a novel or an original idea. It just has to be, as we're discussing, and I'd love you to jump in, is why are you choosing this movie? Are
Yeah.
you choosing this movie like we did, His Girl Friday, because it's a brand and we thought, hey, people would be interested in it? Or are we choosing this movie because it's so meaningful to me? Like, I'm guessing the team of the band's visit picked an obscure movie I'd never heard of and went, oh my God, this is a story that we need to tell.
Well,
And they
I
had the right team to
they did.
tell it.
And I'd seen the band's visit, and when they announced it, I thought it was a great idea. And that answers the three questions to me. That answers does it sing? The band's visit certainly does. Do I care? These characters, the situation, I absolutely care. And why this show? Why now? The eternal conflict in the Middle East uh, between Egyptians, Palestinians, Jews, Israelis. Yes. So that was a high stakes slam dunk of the three questions. And I think the three questions are important for us to kind of like boil down. Because I think you can apply that to His Girl Friday, which we spent some time looking at. Did it sing? Yes. Did we care? Not enough. Why this show? Why now? Couldn't find it. I'm just sitting here
So
thinking if we transferred the Cary Grant character and made the Cary Grant character a woman, but again, it's just toxic behavior. I kind of don't care which gender is, in the driver's seat of toxic behavior at the moment, because that gets to your Glengarry Glen Ross question, which is, do we need to see toxic behavior right now? Is that like a thing we're not getting enough
yeah,
of in society? So
yeah. I
I'm
mean,
good.
yeah. I mean, it's an interesting question because, do I really need to see an anti-war film or an anti-war story? No, but I think it's important because I think a lot of people do need to see that. But I think when you're just demonstrating male toxicity, there's a lot of people that are not even going to understand that, you're not really supposed to be following these guys necessarily. But what's interesting? Talking about His Girl Friday, I want to mention one of my favorite musicals of all time, and I want to see if we can pinpoint what the difference is. And maybe there's not one. And it's Guys and Dolls,
Oh,
which
sure.
is again one of my favorite musicals ever. And I would say, that story is basically fluff. Like there's no reason to do it right now, although I would love to see a production of Guys and Dolls right now because it's so brilliant.
Yeah.
But in a way, the two male characters, the two lead characters, are not necessarily, likable, and yet, the author made them likable,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, he did.
You like Detroit and you like Sky Masterson, even though, they're doing not great things, but somehow he's managed to make them empathetic, right? But
Absolutely.
maybe because of humor and the time, but are these characters less toxic than the characters in His Girl Friday? I wonder. I think they are, but I don't know why.
I think that they are because of how they're rendered. And I think it obviously, huge props to Frank Lesser, is a name we
Yeah.
don't mention enough. Um,
No.
Honestly, one of the all-time.
Master,
I mean, he's in the pantheon. He's on the Mount Rushmore.
without it.
I mean, just
Yeah.
for Most
Yeah.
Happy Fellow alone, frankly, I mean, The Most Happy
Yeah.
Fellow was one
It's
of the
so
most
funny.
influential shows for me, to say nothing of Guys and Dolls and How to Succeed. But my God, what an incredible contribution.
My frustration with My Happy Fella was
Most Happy.
that I've never seen the show,
Oh, I've seen
but
it.
I listened to that score so much and tried to love it and never could. I
Oh,
liked one or two melodies,
huh.
but I just couldn't get into the melodies. I don't know why, because it's him and he's such a genius. And every song in Guys and Dolls blows my mind. That's just,
That's
taste,
interesting.
but yes,
Um,
he's the master.
but but I do think it's a really the anti-hero question. And I know, we even have different feelings about anti-heroes in television. You're tired of them. I think that
Yeah.
some of them are just eternal and great. But I think it's if you look at the lyrics and the dialogue in Guys and Dolls, it's of an era, it's of a time. Um, but I'm never actually offended by what Sky or Nathan say to Sarah or Adelaide. Like they're generally very respectful to their women. They're not giving them what they want as men themselves because they're, gamblers and low level criminals, but they're not disrespectful to them. And I felt when we were watching His Girl Friday that Cary Grant was just being disrespectful to fucking everybody. And even though he was charming about it, but Sky and Nathan are charming, and all of their compadres are who they are. But they all have a non-abrasive charm that I think carries the day because they're also really funny, and they're intentionally funny and unintentionally funny
No,
in the right
at
measure.
the end of the day, I'm hearing you. I slightly disagree because I do think that partly what Nathan and Sky are doing is somewhat despicable. You could, if you put it in modern terms and it was like a serious piece, you go, I don't like you, I don't want to follow you. I
John
think
Proctor is the villain.
what makes Guys and Dolls work is that it was written at a time where all of that was funny and cute.
Yeah,
And whereas Guys and Dolls works as a musical because it's just so classic and great, when I was attempting to write His Girl Friday, even though this opening song was really fun to write because it was just a news hustle bustle of
yeah.
the newsroom, hadn't gotten into the story yet. Once I got the story, I went, I don't really want to write this. Like, because I guess now that I'm saying it, Guys and Dolls has already been written. I think we could have written a musical that worked had we done it. But I think what ultimately happened is I didn't want to. And now that we're mentioning Guys and Dolls, it's like they already did it. This is that
Well,
musical,
that's
that
true
same
too. No, no, no,
kind of
that's true too.
musical done perfectly. Why do you need another one? And then I felt like I don't want to spend all this effort. Writing songs is hard. Writing a great song, as we know, takes a lot of effort, even though sometimes it flows out, sometimes it doesn't. And just the thought, I guess I just had the thought of, am I going to put all the effort it takes for us to do our best work into a story that is like, yeah, I don't think so.
Well, I mean, it certainly is different from the way My Improbable Sisters unfolded, which was just it felt so effortless, all the
Yeah.
time. Like both sides of that piece, the family, the sisters side and the Claudette Colvin side, just felt so just you would just these melodies were just flowing out of you. Like there was no and the genre and the time, the that
Yeah.
that era and even the songs that you wrote for Jenna's character, for the Rachel character, that weren't of that era. They had their own, more contemporary genres. I mean, they were just flowing out of you. And then, we didn't have these restraints of, well, it's so interesting because so often as a lyricist, I find the more constraints you have in the narrative, the more that frees you because then you know what the lane is.
Yeah.
But we knew what the lanes were. You were very clear about it. You wanted it to be, just these two characters out of all of them who sang. And so therefore that established it was all a projection of the one sister. It was
Yeah.
her point of view. Um, so in a way, there were constraints, but we weren't grappling with. these issues of outdatedness in a particular way, or that it had been done before in a particular way. And there is something about, well, you found a vein that's not been actually mined before that is pretty freeing. And within that, I think we found the structure of each one of those songs. And because it had never been done before, I mean, of course, nobody knows what this show is yet, but we're going to talk a little bit more about our stuff. But
Yeah.
I'm just reflecting on, when you approach a project at the beginning, and you're making these decisions about, do I want to spend the next year, 5 years, 10 years in this world and with these characters? What are the red flags that keep you from following that road? And none of those were apparent when we were doing in My Improbable Sisters, and all of them were when we sat down to try and look at His Girl Friday, which I think is just, always
Yeah.
important to look at.
Just because it's our podcast, and I think it's important to sing our own praises, since
Because if
really
we
nobody
don't,
else,
like literally no one else
there's no
will.
nobody else really singing
Okay.
them right now.
So that brings
Um,
us to Little Dorrit, unless you want to take a
well, I
sidestep
just had one
first.
more point, which is
Sure.
just that, because of our experience, because we have experience in writing musicals, this is not our first rodeo. And I think it was free that we could go, let's create our own form of a musical, because My Improbable Sisters is not like any other musical. And it was intentional. As you said, only there are like 7 or 8 characters in this musical, but intentionally only 2 of them sing. And it's almost a play with songs, but I would never call it that. It's actually a musical. But it is a different form of a musical that has, as to my knowledge, has never been done, which is something that I would only suggest doing once you've written a couple of musicals and know how to write them. But of course, Orson Welles had never directed a movie before and didn't know how until he directed Citizen Kane and stumbled across a whole new way of filmmaking that people have copied ever since. So there are no rules. And,
I mean, there are no rules except that there are not a lot of Orson Welles. I mean, there's, maybe one per decade, you know.
I am in the camp that it's okay if you don't know what you're doing, um, as long as, it's heartfelt. Because again, everything in art is subjective. Everything.
I'm
So there,
less in the camp of, don't, if you don't know what you're doing. I think you should learn if you don't know what you're doing and then
well,
start applying
always,
it
but sometimes the
there.
greatest way to learn is by
Oh,
doing.
absolutely. Oh no, that's
I
absolutely.
never I never took a course because there isn't one on how to write a musical. So I just dived in with just liking musicals, just trying to write my own. And then I learned through doing. And I do think that that is an incredible way to learn.
No, of course. It is how you learn. It is how you
Yeah,
learn.
that's how you figure it out.
But I
And you
also
have
think,
to
and we
fail
said this a
first.
couple of episodes, go back and study everything in your discipline. I mean, go and study every musical, the ones that worked, the ones that didn't, and go and read every book you can. And because, as you say, there really isn't,
Yeah. And
curriculum.
I would just add to that, just do what inspires you. Again, the fault of His Girl Friday is that we were not going for inspiration, we were going for commerce, which
Yeah.
is important.
Yes, it is.
And you can do both. But there was an example if we went for commerce and we weren't inspired.
And I
And
think
if
a lot of shows, I'm sorry to interrupt, but like I think a lot of shows that take, IP, like film sources, or like these musicals, that you can always tell when the writers were inspired or found an angle on it and when it was just commerce. And
yes,
I mean, I'll give you my example, kind of my gold standard example of, you know, um, a team got handed a big piece of IP and they were just inspired and they wrote a great musical, and that's Legally Blonde. Just really, just competent people, who were really, really good at their jobs. Now, Benjamin, I think that was that Larry O'Keefe? I guess it was. Can't remember now. Anyway, but a great show. Like it's just like, they actually they without reinventing it, they just found inspiration inside it and wrote a great book and great songs. And it actually happens very rarely with those projects at that scale.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point is that, when you're inspired and when you're not. I don't I don't like to necessarily disparage anyone, but I'm going to both compliment and disparage a team, which is the writing team of Les Mis, which the musical Les Mis, whatever you want to say about it, is amazingly inspired. Those guys were so inspired when they had this idea before John and Trevor even got to it. And then when John Caird and Trevor, I just forgot Trevor's last name.
None.
Thank you. When John and Trevor, none got to it, they took it to the next level. But the reason they wanted to work on the piece is they could tell this piece was incredibly inspired. So now the team's next musical, which is extremely popular, and I'm very much in the minority, is Miss Saigon, which is another beautiful story and an incredible production. And I happen to find that score incredibly uninspiring. I don't think they were inspired at all. I think they wanted to be, but I don't feel any of the same magic musically
Mm.
or lyrically.
Well, I
Um,
don't find for me those shows you have to decouple the music from the lyrics. I think the music in Les Mis and a lot of the music in Miss Saigon and some of the music in Martin Guerre is inspired, mostly in Les Mis, very inspired, um, beautiful. Um, I could use some more variety for me because I tended for a long time to feel like the songs were like there's the fast one and there's the slow one in Les Mis, and they just keep repeating them. But I think there's more to it than that. And then I saw it in the West End in a production in the West End where after they had cut it down from 3 hours and 20 minutes to 2.5
yes,
hours.
after John and Trevor were fired for so that they could save money and not pay them.
And it looked and felt so much better at that leaner pace. Like I really got it.
Oh, do not say that on this podcast.
Oh, okay,
Please.
sorry. I'll
Yes.
edit that. But
Yeah,
anyway, but for
because
me,
truly, the original Les Mis was one of the most brilliantly staged
oh,
musicals I've
absolutely.
ever seen in my life.
Absolutely, but also really, really long. Like I just, yeah. I mean, here's the thing about Les Mis. I think the music's inspired. Obviously, the staging was inspired. Some indelible performances. The lyrics have always been just really clunky and prosaic to me, and just not at all good at all.
But I'm going to say this about Les Mis, and I've said it to John. I've said to John, "Hey, why don't you just like cut out a lot of that russet? Just keep the songs and add some dialogue." Because I actually think that what makes the lyrics sound very weak is the russet. The russet is all clunky, all of it, to me. And most russet is clunky that is not written by Stephen Sondheim. And and very few people know how to write russet. But the songs in Les Mis are inspired. And maybe I will leave the lyric critique to you, but I think there are some lyrics that sit just great on those tunes and the
Yeah.
music.
I
And
mean,
and I
I
think
could
it's
just
the russet that is
sure.
it's just like, hi, just say it. Don't sing it because it sounds stupid to me.
Well, no, it does to me too because it's the hand me that piano. Like not everything.
Yes.
You really want to sing when you have to, and then
And the king of this is Andrew Lloyd Webber, which is like,
oh,
why
that's
is everything
totally.
russet? It just drives me crazy.
We're not gonna do Tim Rice either. But yeah, you're right. I don't really want to, but if I just took a random, like I'm just in my head, like thinking about those songs that are not Reset, it's just like I couldn't to go. If the music is ba da da ba da da ba da da, you don't set I love him, I love him, I love him, because that's not what you're saying. You're saying I love him, I love him, I love him, but only on my own. You're not saying I love him. I love him
I
because
hear the love stressed. I don't hear him stressed in the
it's
music.
really not that.
But
Because you know
that's a
why?
disappointing if it is.
But here's why you're wrong, and I'll tell you why you're
Right.
absolutely wrong. Because the I love him notes are the on my own notes. They're the same notes on my own, which is correct prosody. So your ear is already trained to be hearing those three notes that way. So your ear from the very beginning of that song and the hook of that song is going on my own, bum bum. So when you hear it at the end,
But they're
I
phrasing
love
that
him.
last phrase differently, David. They are stressing love, not him. You are incorrect, in my opinion.
But the music has told us that the emphasis will be on the third note.
Well, I mean, I think it's perfectly okay to change a rhythm of a melody to stress a different word.
But he didn't
Um,
change the rhythm. He kept the
well,
rhythm the same.
I love him is the rhythm. That's what they sing. But
It
it may
is,
be differently.
but you are
They're stressing love.
well, okay,
Listen, you
but the
are
music,
correct in a lot of places in the score, but I don't think you picked the right one. But I love you, David.
well,
I love
well,
you, but only on my own.
okay.
That's
Well,
not what
we
I
can agree to disagree on that,
wrote.
but I'm
But
right.
talk to me about Dorrit, because that's
But
what
I'm
you
right,
really
you're wrong.
want.
But yes, so let's go to Dorrit. So Dorrit has does it sing?
Want
Yes.
to tell our one listener what Dorrit is
Oh, Little
before you?
Dorrit. It's Dickens' Little Dorrit. So it is an adaptation of the 1100 page early Charles Dickens novel, Little Dorrit, which, for those of you interested, was was adapted into a really wonderful uh, 6 or 10 part PBS not doc miniseries starring the great Claire Foy.
Mm. If you
And
liked her in The Crown, you'll love her in this.
oh,
And who
she's
else is
amazing.
starring in it, David? An actor on Succession, I
That's
believe.
right. Yes, the
Who
great
is that?
is it Matthew McFadden? Is that his name?
I think so. I think
Yeah.
so.
He
And I
he
think
he's Tom on Succession, and he plays Arthur.
what's brilliant about his performance and
Oh,
him as an
it
actor
was brilliant.
is that obviously everybody's familiar with Tom on Succession and how despicable Tom is, and yet when he plays Arthur in Little Dorrit, it's the opposite. He's
Opposite.
this kind, loving human that it's just he's
He's
quite a
a
range. Those
wonderful
two characters.
character and such a wonderful actor. So we fell in love with this
Really did.
miniseries. So good, and I don't
Who
remember.
asked us to write this, David? Who asked us to work on this?
This is John Caird.
Yes, I think John Caird asked us to work on this. And should John ever be listening, John, what happened?
What
Why
happened,
haven't you
John?
got back to
Um,
us?
so we've got a very solid first act right now. Um,
Yes.
but to get back to our three questions, it definitely sang. We definitely cared about the characters, and it definitely had a why this musical, why now?
Yeah.
And the why this musical, why now, which is eternal from Dickens, um, Dickens' initial inspiration, which maintains, is
Yeah.
about economic disparity, economic yeah. Um, inequality, in
He's
economic inequality, which is an eternal subject in in the world, in a democracy, in any kind of
in
governmental.
all Dickens' work. When John and I tackled, we had a musical where we put some of Dickens' stories together, Great Expectations, um, a musical that we call Estella Scrooge,
Yep,
A Christmas Carol, and
yep,
Nicholas Nickleby, because that story was about income equality profoundly.
yeah,
And most of his work is.
yeah,
And what made Dorrit so appealing was not only that aspect of it, but it has one of my favorite love stories.
yeah. Which I do think most successful musicals need. They need
Yeah.
some form of love. They need
Uh,
love or a love story.
it could
Uh,
be a friendship
yeah,
story, but
absolutely,
in this
absolutely.
case, it's a love story.
And so everything about it was really appealing. So we're good. We've got a we've come a long way. We're ready to we would be ready to go if anyone listening to this wants to put this into production. But we're still tinkering away. But you had mentioned as a bit of lyric writing, we were talking about um, Sondheim's use of uh, Gilbert and Sullivan esque um, writing. And you mentioned this piece from Dorrit. So I thought I'd, you know, bring that out. Thought I'd trot that out.
I mean, you're so good at this. I mean, for whatever reason, Gilbert and Sullivan is in your brain as much as it was in Sondheim's brain.
Well, when
And
I
I
was an
think,
opera singer, I was in a lot of these. So I really learned like in my teens and early 20s, like I really broke down all of these. Anyway, continue.
and even though, myself, Jay Gruska, and Pamela Adlon were the first person to ever write a rap song in a musical,
Yeah.
I have lost, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I don't do that anymore. And
Yeah.
and and it doesn't really come natural to me the way it does for you. And I'm very jealous because even in this opening song I wrote for His Girl Friday, I was, it was very much patter lyric. And it's hard. And the rhyme schemes are hard, especially when you're going for true triple rhymes and sort of and when we talk about the song that we're about to talk about, I think the rhyme schemes and the prosody of how you've set this up is pretty remarkable. So why don't you talk about it?
Well, thanks, Paul. And there's an additional thing because in this particular case, it's also a character speaking in sort of a pidgin French English.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and, because he's this French character and he's a villain.
Now, were you inspired at all by Hello? Because he does some of that in Say Hello, where he has foreign language characters
Absolutely,
all over the place.
absolutely,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. And I think all of Please Hello, you have the Russian, you have the French, you have the British. They all employ those the sort of cliche phrases as humor, as a part of the patter, and so absolutely, Please Hello is always there. I mean, Please Hello, Now Later Soon from Night
Film
Music.
that music.
Um, so anyway, so here's a little bit of Rigo, and I'll if I can ever edit the podcast correctly, I'll also we have permission to use these demo tracks if we want. But uh, this is the villain character, um, and it's in the middle of a wonderful tune that you wrote called the Men's Song, which Fanny, who's the sister of Amy Dorrit, is a showgirl singing in a tawdry little music hall this song about men, um, which is a waltz song of all things, a very crunchy, um, uh, funny, masculine tune that this character is singing about how awful men are. And as we hear this song, we are introduced outside the theater to Monsieur Legault, who is the devious villain of the piece, in a pub um, where he is plotting against another character from afar. And to do that, he is trying to get everybody, we get this character drunk. So he sings to um, the barmaid, who were the pub owner, female. And here's how some of that goes. And I'm not going to do it in tempo because it's a lot. And then you'll hear it when I put that on. Bonsoir, chère mademoiselle. I bet. Well, let me do it in tempo a little bit. It's this kind of one. Bonsoir, chère mademoiselle, I beg your pity. I'm how you say nouvelle to your fine city. And speaking of nouvelle, I'd like it very well to sample your cuisine and feed your kitty. The devil has been known to dance a little, at times when he's alone, advance a little. I promise, little bird, I'm giving you my word, he's not been seen nor heard in France a little. My name is not Rigaud, who saw the court we know see fit to overthrow a charge of murder. It's not my wife they feared had somehow disappeared. She begged me for her freedom, and I heard her. I am Lanier in France, Blandois in Britain, to give myself a chance to merely fit in, some wine to drink, a comfy seat to sit in. Merci beaucoup.
That's so great. So
and
great, Dave. I
then
love
I
it.
and then I keep going. There's like three more verses of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what's remarkable about it is just that, first of all, the content of the information is so important of what we're trying to convey to the audience and his character. And the fact that you have these amazing internal triple rhymes, it dances on the air. And that's sort of the way that I would put it. I feel like you created this melody. I mean, and it is a melody. It's not rapped. It is
No, it's
sung. I
sung. Yeah,
think it's
it
a
is sung.
very, and I guess, for me, it's just like, yeah, I like this kind of lyric when it's sung quickly, but it has this edge of a melody that feels musical. And anyway, I just think it's great. What else do you want to say about it?
Oh, what I would say is two things. I would say wh- what I think is important about doing this type of patter rhythm is to find where the beats are and to really know where to land the rhymes. And then find a way to make the rhyme scheme interesting, not just the words, but the rhyme scheme interesting. So your tune was men treat you bad, men do you wrong. For singing this song. Dun, 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 dun. It was just this wonderful opportunity to have to fill in those cracks in that melody.
Da, 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 da.
Yeah,
Yes, and what was great is that your little dip in the melody went so brilliantly with it created a counterpoint
yeah.
to my original melody for Fanny. And that's just a great fun kind of collaboration between you and I in terms of, I had this feel in this music that was a waltz, but it was a dirty waltz.
Dirty
And
Waltz. Yeah.
and then it was set up for Rigaud to have his counter. And I think when you play this for our listener, I think our listener will be very, very impressed with how this was put together. Um, and I think, you're sort of a master at that. So how would you, so like to our listener or listeners, like if they are attempting something as complex as this and they don't necessarily have never done it before,
Yeah.
and like I know for me, like hearing your lyric, it's just like, oh my God, I could never do that. What do you say to them? How do you get their toe in the water? What is the best way for them to start to feel like I could do this?
So, first of all, you always have to know what you want to say, what needs to get accomplished narratively first. That needs to get sort of written out. And as you're writing that out, here are the points I need to make. And here's the character traits that need to come through. And when you start to just write those ideas down, pay attention as you're writing them down for what the interesting words are. Oh, that's a great word to rhyme, for example. Um, mademoiselle. Obviously, he was going to say mademoiselle to this woman. So for me, mademoiselle became, I'm going to land on the L because that can be interesting. So then I had bonsoir, chère mademoiselle. And then, but then I would immediately go to, I beg your pardon. But nothing's going to rhyme with pardon. So I'm going to have to table that for a minute. But mademoiselle is great because then I can start rhyming that with I'm how you say, which is the first one of those cliche expressions. I'm how you say nouvelle. He gets it wrong. It means new, but it's in French. I'm how
Right.
you say nouvelle to your fine city. So when I came up with I'm new to your city, then I went, oh, I can reverse engineer city and start rhyming that with words. And then
Mm.
that led to that led to the rhyme scheme, which was Mademoiselle, I beg your pity. I'm how you say nouvelle to your fine city. So it's rather than trying to end every line on the last syllable, which is less interesting. It's on the penultimate syllable, the feminine rhyme. So it's pity, city, sample your cuisine and feed your kitty, which then has, of course, double entendres in it. But so I'm starting to reverse engineer off of what I need to say, how I need to say it, and what makes it the most interesting rhyme scheme to accomplish, given what you've established musically, which is these melodic notes directly on the beat. Bum, 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 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So what I know is at the end of every one of those phrases, I'm going to have a lot of time. I'm going to have in every one of those fourth bars, I'm going to have the ability, because there's air, to go ba 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 ba, right? And two and three and so if I want Rigaud to be more nimble, Fanny, the singer of the melody, is dirty and direct and aggressive and on the beat, but Rigaud is nimble and sly. So he's going to be off that beat. One and two and three and 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 then I'm just keeping the tonality that you created chord wise. Like I'm literally just on the fifth all the time.
Let me
So
ask you this.
those are
Go
the
ahead.
those are no, but those are like just in terms of just like establishing, okay, this is just rhythmically what it's going to be, and prosody what it's going to be. Don't be easy on myself about where the accents fall, where the words fall is where the rhymes need to fall, and the rhymes need to be the most important words in the sentence, not off words. But actually, the words I need to hear. If I only heard those words, I would understand them. I would understand what was being sung at me because it's going to be going by very quickly. So I can't have unimportant rhyme words on those beats. They have to actually be the words that are the most important all along the way. And
Understood.
it's a puzzle.
Understood. So we're going to have to wind out because I have to go protest the
Yeah.
idiocy that's happening right now in our country. So for
I
our
don't know what you
listeners,
mean, Paul. I'm just waiting. This is a master plan. It's all going to turn around.
I
And
know Jesus Christ, it's important.
the fact that our savings have been literally cut in half in the past 80 days and half of that in the past two is all a
Yeah,
plan. It's going to
so great.
completely rebound.
Before we go, I do want to ask you a lyric question on this line. Is that you do some really interesting rhymes, and I know we've talked about we use a rhyming dictionary, and I know you use a rhyming dictionary,
Yeah.
but for our listener, where do you come up with the rhyme for murder? Heard her. That's not in a rhyming dictionary.
No, it's not.
How do you do that?
Well, you're always trying to do that. You're always trying to remember that rhyming in the theater is not about what's on the page. Like it's not poetry in that way. So like you don't rhyme rain with a gain because it looks the same on the page, right? So I mean, you're always thinking about, well, how does it sound? Because that's actually the most important thing. So there's a rhyme in Five Women in an Airport in the beginning where it's a pause. It's a pause. It's okay. You can waste time. Order in, have a binge, slow your pace. Don't wear pants when you Zoom or you FaceTime, and don't touch your mouth, eyes, or face. So it's like I'm rhyming. I'm rhyming waste time with FaceTime. Now, technically, it's waste time and face.
Yeah, but you don't hear the T,
But
so it
the T
sounds.
is elided, so it's waste time, FaceTime. It's the same with murder, heard her. You're not going to do that H. You're going to drop the H.
I
But it's
understand that.
all oral. It's all you're just
Right.
listening for it.
Yes, I understand that, and that's a great point. But the other part of my question is, how do you come up with it in a rhyming dictionary if it's not in a rhyming dictionary?
Yeah, you just have to. you have to, in the case of Murder Heard Her, it was, I think murder comes first because that you want the audience to know that he has committed murder, right? At that point, let's say you do go to your rhyming dictionary, you're not going to find a lot. You're going to find, girder, which is not going to be very useful,
Not helpful. Yeah.
right? Or, or someone is a professional birder. It's like there's not a lot, and you wouldn't necessarily even want to do that because they're
Well,
going to
because it
be
doesn't mean
stretching.
anything.
They don't mean anything. They're
Right.
going to be stretches, and they're going to not be that great.
Yeah.
So if you know you want to use the word murder, then you start breaking it down, and you think murd
And
is
you look at your rhyming dictionary and you go, all the erd rhymes. So you came up. So, but what I
there's a lot
guess
more
I'm,
there's a lot of murd, and then murd will be the past tense of mur, of her or were, right? Like it's going to have a D on it. The D could be an ED. So I mean,
well, it has to be I guess it didn't have to, but you rhymed an erd worm and then you'd rhymed with her. But I guess for our listener, the challenge is like, like there's a million words that you might want to use, like burden. Like
you're
burden is a very hard word to rhyme, or you can't rhyme it. So have you, in your lyric writing experience, rhymed burden with anything?
you could say, it was really a burden. I
I
couldn't
heard
get it.
them.
No, it
Burden.
would be a
No, that
rhyme.
doesn't work. That's not a true rhyme.
Burden you could rhyme with I could never get a word in.
Burden, wording.
You could do that.
Burden, wording.
That would be
But
a perfect
you're
rhyme.
good with burden
Yeah,
in.
because there's a slight variation on the vowel sound, but if the music is going by quickly enough and
Yeah.
the character can get away with,
But isn't it
most
also
people don't say
pronunciation?
it isn't, it isn't. If you really think about the word burden, no one is going burden, right?
That's true.
That's
Burden.
another excessive, right. So that's what I'm saying. It's
Burden.
oral. It's all what the ear hears is more
Yeah.
important than what's on the page. Because if you were going to actually say how you pronounce the word burden, it would be burden, but no one ever says it that way. There's a burden.
So, so I'm hearing that you don't necessarily have a technique for those two syllable rhymes that don't rhyme. If the word is, if it's a word you want to use, you're just going to sit there for as long as it takes and see if you can create two words that will rhyme. And if you can't, you will move on.
Yeah, there is a, I mean, I would argue that there's no technique, but there's not always an answer, right? So, I mean, so
Clearly.
the technique is go through as many variables and varieties in as many ways, using as many tools, your rhyming dictionary, breaking the word in half, thinking about spending the time you need to spend. But yeah, the technique is if it's not there and you're
Yeah.
stretching for it, or you're having to use a false rhyme, abandon it, find a whole other way to say it.
So there are certain words that we know that probably you think of that just, yeah, I'll never find a rhyme for that. I'm not going to try it. Like a word like justice. Have you ever rhymed justice?
Oh, I think you could get away with a rhyme for justice.
I
Uh,
mean, that's the word where it comes up in my lyrics. I just throw it out if it's a rhyme because I just have tried to rhyme it for years. But I'm sure you'll think of a rhyme right now that I haven't
ah,
thought of.
um, I
Well, I won't put that kind of pressure on you. Why don't you save it for
no,
next
no,
week?
you
'Cause
could like if you had a character who was like like a mob guy and was
yeah, that's what I'm
saying,
saying. Pronunciation, you can do
yeah,
it. So what would you do?
pronunciation you could get away with, like, there ain't no justice, um you know uh but now this rhyme, no, I'm gonna bust this, I mean, or that's
Yeah,
terrible,
justice,
or
justice. That
oh,
is a
no, no,
rhyme.
no, no, here we go. In this town there ain't no justice, but listen when I say and trust this. You could do that.
Yeah, see, that's hard for me. That's what I need to work on.
But that's doable. And I mean, and again, if I had that character, I would consider doing that as a rhyme. And certainly
Totally. I mean, that totally works for me.
With Rigaud, that comes up. Like, the fact that he has a French accent means there are certain things you can rhyme that you couldn't rhyme.
Right. If somebody's a hillbilly, can we still say that word? Um,
Hmm. No.
they're gonna pronounce things. There, you can have different rhymes for them than somebody who speaks proper English,
Right.
who speaks the Queen's English, and somebody
Right.
who's from Appalachia.
Which is a wonderful component of writing for the theater because you're writing always for a character who is a very specific, has a very specific sound, and you can enjoy the parameters that sets up for you.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, David, I'm going to go fight for your rights now.
Thank you, Paul. Someone's got to, but like I said, it's all going to be fine. It's like COVID. It's
Oh,
just,
it's all fine. Feels great.
yeah,
Feels great right
it's
now.
really great.
Yeah,
Well, this has been fun.
really fun.
Thanks for joining this week's issue
Yeah.
of
Thanks to you, David, and thanks to our listener for listening.
yeah,
And we'll see you next time.
um, on my favorite sings.
Jesus Christ.
Thanks, Paul. I love you.
Love you.
Bye. My Favorite Sings with David Goldsmith and Paul Gordon is a production of Virtual Stage Lab. Virtual Stage Lab was founded to create film captures of original musicals and plays to democratize how theater gets developed, seen, produced, and licensed for production. If you have a favorite sing from a musical that you'd like to have David and Paul discuss, break down, and analyze, please contact our Director of Marketing, Melody Munitz, at virtualstagelab@gmail.com. For more information and our catalog of original projects by Paul Gordon and David Goldsmith and others, go to www.virtualstagelab.com. Main title parody lyrics written and performed by David Goldsmith. End title music by Paul Gordon from the Gordon and Goldsmith musical My Improbable Sisters, starring Jenna Rosen and Tony Award nominee Jasmine Amy Rogers, now available to stream for free on the Virtual Stage Lab page on YouTube. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please like, comment, and share on social media. Thank you for listening. Welcome to the community. This has been My Favorite Sings, a practically perfect, not at all corny title. Title under protest by Paul Gordon.